wind drives snow sideways. It scrubs the yard clean. It steals sound. Officer _EC, calm-focused male officer, early 30s, medium athletic build, defined jawline, short textured dark hair, light stubble, slightly tired eyes, natural skin texture with pores, tactical police uniform with subtle wear marks, grounded, realistic expression, stands on a porch that creaks too loud. He checks the gate line, the barn, the tree line, routine, then a gap. No dog inside. Fresh paw prints cut tight circles near the back door. Not play. Work. K9_Shadow, black and tan German Shepherd, black saddle pattern, black facial mask, golden tan fur, upright alert ears, amber eyes, small notch on left ear, muscular structure, realistic fur texture, tactical K9 harness, freezes. No bark, no glance back. A scrape, wood on something. Then nothing. The latch sits wrong. He touches the knob. Warm, human warm. The wind in the Montana hills didn't howl like something alive. It worked like a tool. It sanded edges down. It erased footprints. It stole heat from metal and memory with the same patient indifference. Officer Ethan Cole, of Tree, stood on the porch of the farmhouse he technically owned, staring into the whiteout like it was a wall he could lean against. The structure behind him was crooked and tired, half swallowed by snowdrifts that climbed the siding like frost trying to reclaim the place plank by plank. He had bought it for the quiet, not the kind that felt peaceful, the kind that felt empty enough to hide inside. The porch boards complained under his boots when he shifted his weight. The sound was small, but out here, small sounds carried. There was nothing else to compete with them. No traffic, no neighbors, no radios leaking talk into the air. Just wind-pushing powder through dead grass and the pine line below the ridge, and the occasional crack of ice shifting somewhere you couldn't see. Ethan didn't smoke, hadn't in years. But he understood why people did, out in places like this. You watched your breath leave you and disappear, and part of you wanted proof you were still here. He pulled his collar higher. The fabric was stiff with cold and old wear. His eyes, steady, disciplined, tracked the slope down to the gate line, then back to the barn silhouette, then out toward the valley road that vanished under drifting snow. Routine. He'd built routines the way some people built walls. Check the perimeter, check the locks, check the sky. Every day, the same, because predictable was survivable. He turned to go back inside, and froze. Not because he heard footsteps, because K9 Shadow was not inside. Shadow never drifted far without a reason. Ethan stepped off the porch, boots sinking into powder. The cold tried to bite through leather. His gaze swept the yard, then the barn, then the tree line. Then he saw them. Paw prints, fresh, tight pattern, purposeful. They weren't random loops like a dog playing. They formed a curve that circled back toward the farmhouse, like Shadow was tracing something in the air, trying to find the seam where a scent broke and started again. Ethan's hand slid under his coat without thinking, fingers brushing the familiar shape at his waist. He didn't draw. He didn't need to. He just needed the contact, an anchor for his mind. His heart rate didn't spike. It narrowed. He followed the prints. At the side of the house, near the back door, Shadow stood with his body angled forward, ears upright and locked. No barking. No panic. Just attention so focused it felt like pressure. Ethan's voice came out low, calm, designed not to feed adrenaline. Shadow. The dog didn't look back. That told Ethan everything. Shadow was tracking something Ethan hadn't seen yet. Then Ethan heard it. Not a voice, not a growl. A single sound like fingers scraping wood, slow, deliberate, followed by silence. Ethan moved closer, slow enough that each step placed itself carefully. He scanned the shadows under the eaves. The drift against the back wall, the shed line. Shadow's nose flared once. His tail stayed stiff. Ethan looked at the back door. The latch was not how he left it. A small detail, a half-inch shift. But Ethan lived in details. Details were where danger hid before it had a name. He exhaled once, controlled. Then he reached down and rested 2 fingers on Shadow's harness, not to hold him back, to synchronize. "Stay," Ethan murmured. Shadow did not move, but the muscles along his shoulders trembled, ready. Ethan put his hand on the doorknob. It was warm, not sun on metal, warm, human warm. His mind tried to pull him backward in time, other doors, other handles, other rooms where warmth meant bodies and bodies meant chaos. His jaw tightened. He didn't let the memory take his hands. He turned the knob. The door opened an inch. Warm air spilled out like the house was breathing. And in the dark inside, something shifted. Ethan didn't step in yet. He listened. A faint, shallow breath. Not his, not Shadow's. Then the softest sound of fabric moving, like someone trying not to be heard. Ethan's voice stayed even. "Show yourself." Silence. Shadow's lips pulled back just enough to show teeth. No sound, just a warning written in bone and instinct. Ethan nudged the door wider with the edge of his boot. The air smelled like pine smoke and damp wool. Someone had a fire going. That was impossible. The chimney had been dead when Ethan bought the place. He'd checked it. No working flue, no clean hearth, just old nests and soot packed like a tomb. Yet, somewhere inside, the orange flicker of flame threw light against the hallway wall. Ethan stepped in. Shadow moved with him, close, controlled, not pulling. The living room had changed. It wasn't pristine, it wasn't safe, but it was lived in. Swept floor, firewood stacked, a broken window patched with cardboard and duct tape. Someone had been careful. That care unsettled Ethan more than chaos would have. Because care meant intention. And intention meant a person who had a reason to be here. He saw the figure near the fireplace. A young man, early 20s, standing rigid, hands up like he'd been caught stealing. The kid's face was pale from cold and exhaustion, but his eyes were wide and clear, scanning Ethan's stance, his hands, the dog. The kid's jacket was too thin for this weather. His hair was a mess under a knit cap. A cut on his knuckle looked fresh, like he'd been working with broken boards. Ethan kept his hand visible, palm angled down. Control signal, non-escalation. Shadow's body went stiller. The young man swallowed. "Please," he said, voice tight. Don't call it in. I'm not here to hurt anyone." Ethan watched him the way he'd watched suspects and witnesses and broken people for years. Not with suspicion, with calibration. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. The kid's eyes flicked to Shadow, then back to Ethan. "Deputy Lucas Reed." Ethan's expression didn't change, but something inside him shifted. A deputy? A cop. Not a drifter. Not a burglar. Lucas's throat worked again. "I didn't know it was yours. I thought it was abandoned." "It is," Ethan said, then corrected himself in the same breath. "It was." Lucas's hand shook slightly, whether from cold or adrenaline Ethan couldn't tell. I needed one night. The storm. Shadow took one step forward, not aggressive, assessing. Lucas's breath hitched. "Easy," he whispered to the dog, instinctively using the tone that people used when they loved animals more than they trusted humans. "Easy, buddy." Shadow didn't relax. Ethan's gaze narrowed. "Where's your unit?" Lucas flinched like the question had teeth. "Not with me." "Why?" Lucas's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at the window, where the storm pressed against the patchwork cardboard like a fist. "I can explain," Lucas said, "but not like this. Not with a radio listening." Ethan stared at him for a long moment. This was the moment where his old life would have done the easy thing. Call it in. Let systems handle it. Let other people absorb the chaos. But Ethan didn't trust systems anymore. Not fully. Not after seeing how often systems protected themselves first. Shadow's eyes stayed locked on Lucas. Ethan's voice remained flat. "Why is Shadow with you?" Lucas blinked. "He's not with me. He found me." That stopped Ethan. Lucas's gaze dropped to the dog like it hurt to look. "I was in the tree line, trying to decide if freezing was better than other options." Ethan didn't react outwardly. Inside, something tightened. Lucas continued, words coming faster now, like the dam had cracked. "I saw him in the storm. He was tracking. I thought he was feral. But he came right up to me, sniffed my hands, then walked away and looked back like he expected me to follow." Shadow's ears twitched at Lucas's voice, still alert, but listening now. Lucas swallowed again. "So I did, and he led me here." Ethan's eyes stayed on the kid, but he spoke to Shadow. "That true?" Shadow gave a low sound, not a bark, more like breath moving through chest, a confirmation without language. Ethan felt a cold line crawl up his spine. Shadow did not make decisions like that without a reason, which meant Lucas Reed wasn't here by accident. Ethan nodded once, slow. Put your hands down." Lucas hesitated, then lowered them carefully. Ethan shifted his stance slightly, angled so he could see the door and the window in one line. "Talk," Ethan said. Lucas took a breath. "My dad died 3 months ago." Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. He wasn't sick. He wasn't reckless. He was careful. Always. Lucas's voice cracked on the last word, and he hated himself for it. You could see the way he tried to swallow it back down. They said it was a car accident, black ice, lost control, but he had new tires. He had chains. He drove like he was carrying glass. Ethan's eyes sharpened. "Who's they?" Lucas's hands curled into fists at his sides. "The county, the sheriff, the same people who told me to stop asking questions." Ethan's face stayed controlled. "Why would you ask questions?" Lucas looked at the fire like it might answer for him. "Because my dad was an engineer, civil. He worked on the survey for the new resort project down the valley. Big money, big promises. Eco this, sustainable that." Ethan watched him closely. Lucas wasn't reciting. He was reliving. "He found something," Lucas said. "Waste diversion. Illegal discharge. They were dumping into the river under cover of construction." Ethan's eyes narrowed further. "And he reported it." Lucas gave a bitter laugh that had no humor in it. "He tried. He refused to sign off. He wrote notes, kept copies. He told me if anything happened, not to trust anyone local." Ethan's gaze flicked a shadow again. The dog sat now, posture still taut, but no longer in attack mode. Listening, guarding. Lucas continued quieter. "After the funeral, I started seeing trucks, black SUVs, parked too long at the end of my street. Once someone left a note under my windshield wiper." Ethan didn't ask what it said. He could guess. "I went to my captain," Lucas said. "Captain Maria Hayes. She listened. She told me to be careful, to document everything. But the next day, Internal wanted to review my access, my files, my body cam logs, like I was the problem." Ethan's face hardened at that. "Why come here?" Lucas's voice dropped. "Because my dad left something on this land." Ethan felt the air change. Lucas's eyes lifted. "This property, this barn, my dad helped board it up years ago for a friend who moved away. He told me once, if the world ever turned upside down, the truth would be where the wood rots first." Ethan stared at him. Then he looked at Shadow, and Shadow looked back. Steady, as if to say, "This is why." Ethan exhaled slowly, the breath controlled but not entirely steady. "You're a deputy," Ethan said. "Why not go federal? Why not take it to state?" Lucas's expression twisted. "Because the moment I try, I get followed. Because someone always knows before I do. Because I don't know who's clean." Ethan nodded once, small. That was the heart of it, not fear of danger, fear of nowhere safe to stand. Lucas's shoulders sagged like he'd been holding himself up by anger alone. "I wasn't planning to stay. I just needed to get through the night." Then Shadow showed up and he glanced at the dog again, eyes shining slightly. I don't even know why he did. Ethan's gaze held on Lucas. He could send him away. He could reclaim his empty house and his empty life. But the room was warm. The fire was real. There was another person breathing in his space, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel annoyed by it. He felt challenged, tested, like the world had finally found him again. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the scrape of stubble. "You can stay tonight?" Lucas blinked, like he hadn't expected mercy. Ethan's eyes stayed cold. "But you follow my rules." Lucas nodded too fast. "Yes, okay." Ethan pointed toward the far wall. "You sleep where I can see you. Shadow stays with me." Lucas swallowed. "He won't." Shadow stood, walked to Ethan's side, and sat without being told. Lucas's mouth closed. Ethan's voice softened by a fraction. Not kindness, just reality. He already decided. Lucas's shoulders loosened in something like relief. Outside, the wind slammed snow against the boards. Inside, the fire popped and threw sparks up the stone. Ethan turned to check the door, the latch, the window patches. Habit. Then he paused, listening. Because beyond the storm, beyond the old wood, beyond the quiet, he could feel it, the subtle pressure of being on a map again, being part of something. Ethan didn't like it, but Shadow did not look afraid. Shadow looked ready. Night stretched long. The storm did not ease. It pressed its weight against the farmhouse like it wanted in. Lucas slept badly, half sitting, boots still on, hands tucked under his arms, like he didn't trust the room not to steal warmth from his bones. Ethan didn't sleep much either. He sat near the window with the lights low, watching the whiteness pulse and shift. Shadow lay between them, not fully at rest, always listening. Ethan's mind tried to drag him backward. Old fields, old roads, old screams that arrived without invitation. He fought them the way he always did. Not with emotion, with discipline. Name what's real. Control what you can. Breathe. Then Shadow lifted his head. Ethan felt it instantly, like the dog's body was a tuning fork and the world had struck it. Shadow's ears turned toward the barn. Ethan followed the line with his eyes. Nothing visible. But Shadow stood and moved to the back door, nose working the crack under the frame. Lucas sat up, blinking hard. "What is it?" Ethan didn't answer. Shadow didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply looked back at Ethan once, then returned his gaze to the dark. A request or an instruction? Ethan's jaw tightened. He wasn't here to solve cases. He wasn't here to be anyone's protector. He was here to be nothing. But Shadow had chosen otherwise. Ethan grabbed his coat and flashlight, then hesitated and looked at Lucas. "Stay." Lucas nodded, then changed his mind halfway through. "I should come." "No," Ethan said. "It wasn't a debate. If something happens, you become my liability." Lucas's face flushed with anger and humiliation, but he swallowed it. Ethan stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a slap. Wind shoved snow across his face. He lowered his head and moved with purpose, following Shadow's shape as the dog cut through drifts like he was built for it. The barn stood at the edge of the property, half collapsed, skeletal, its roof bowed under snow load. Shadow stopped at the entrance and sniffed. Then he moved along the interior wall, nose close to the boards. Ethan's flashlight beam flicked across old tools, rusted hooks, a shattered wheelbarrow. Shadow paused at a section of wall where the wood looked darker, oil-stained, different from the surrounding rot. Then Shadow pressed his paw against it and scratched, slow, deliberate. Ethan stared at the spot. A memory surfaced. Someone once telling him the truth would be where the wood rots first. Ethan pulled out his knife and scraped at the board. The top layer flaked away. Underneath, cleaner wood, protected, hidden. Ethan's breath fogged the air. He set the flashlight down, braced his shoulder against the wall, and shoved. The board gave with a groan. A cavity opened, and inside, wrapped in waxed cloth, sat a small wooden box. Ethan lifted it carefully. It was heavier than it looked. He didn't open it yet. He carried it back toward the house, Shadow at his side, storm swirling around them like static. Inside, Lucas was on his feet instantly, eyes locked on the box. "That's it," Lucas whispered. Ethan set the box on the table near the fire. His hands were steady, but his mind wasn't. His instincts were loud now. He pried the rusted latch open. The lid creaked. Inside, papers, maps, photos, receipts. The smell of old oil and damp ink. Lucas's hands shook as he reached for the top document, then stopped, like he was afraid touching it would make it real. Ethan unfolded the first map. A pipeline network across the valley, marked diversions, discharge points, handwritten notes in the margins. Lucas's face went gray. "That's my dad's handwriting," he said. Voice barely there. Ethan flipped to the invoices, company logo, chemical names, quantities. Enough to make a stomach turn even if you didn't know what you were looking at. Then photos, sealed barrels on flatbeds under floodlights, men in hard hats, a riverbank scarred by machinery. Ethan's pulse stayed controlled, but his eyes hardened into something sharp. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't grief inventing patterns. This was evidence. Lucas swallowed hard. "If they find out I have this, they already suspect," Ethan said quietly, "or you wouldn't be here." Lucas looked at him, fear and anger fighting for control. Ethan tapped the papers once, decisive. "We don't sit on this." Lucas's voice broke. "We can't fight them." Ethan met his gaze. "We're not fighting them." He pointed to the map. "We're proving them." Shadow lay down near the table, head on paws, eyes open. As if his job wasn't done, as if it had just started. Morning didn't bring calm. It brought clarity. The storm eased into a quieter snowfall, thick and steady, the kind that muffled the world and made footsteps feel like secrets. Ethan and Lucas moved through the day with the method of people who understood pressure. They didn't talk much. They worked. Ethan reinforced the window patch, double-checked the locks, shifted furniture away from sight lines. Not paranoia. Preparation. Lucas sat at the table with the documents spread in careful order, like he was building a case file the way he'd been trained. But his hands kept trembling. Every few minutes, he'd glance toward the window like he expected headlights to appear. Shadow patrolled the house perimeter, slow and deliberate. No wasted motion. Ethan watched him and felt something old in his chest. Respect, trust, the kind that didn't require explanation. By afternoon, Ethan made a decision. They couldn't rely on local channels, too compromised, too slow, too leaky. But they could build a clean line if they were smart. "You said Captain Maria Hayes listened," Ethan said. Lucas nodded quickly. "She did. She told me to document everything. She told me not to be alone." Ethan's mouth tightened. "Then she's your best bet." Lucas hesitated. "If I call her and she's being watched—" "We don't call," Ethan said. "We route." He pulled out an old laptop, not new, not shiny, something he kept because it didn't ask questions. "We need verification," Ethan said. "Someone who understands how to package this so it stands up." Lucas frowned. "Like a journalist?" Ethan shook his head. "Not first." He typed a name into a secure message draft. "Dr. Lena Moore." Lucas blinked. "Who's that?" Ethan didn't look up. "Forensics, analyst, the kind of brain that doesn't get impressed by money." Lucas swallowed. "You trust her?" Ethan paused, fingers hovering. "I trust her to hate lies." That was as close to trust as Ethan gave anyone. He sent the message, short, controlled, no story, just coordinates, a request, and a warning. Bring no one. Use no local channels. Then he closed the laptop and looked at Lucas. "We verify the discharge point ourselves," Ethan said. "We take photos, GPS coordinates. We make a chain." Lucas's face tightened. "And if they come?" Ethan's eyes stayed flat. "Then we're ready." Shadow returned from the back door, ears forward, as if the dog had heard the word come and didn't like how possible it sounded. They left before dusk. Ethan's truck groaned to life in the cold. The headlights cut through the fading gray. Lucas sat passenger side with the map folded tight in his hands. Shadow occupied the back seat, harness on, posture upright and alert. The valley road was a ribbon of ice and packed snow. The world beyond the windshield looked endless and indifferent. Ethan drove with the same calm he used on patrol. No sudden corrections, no wasted acceleration. Control was everything. Lucas traced the discharge point on the map with a gloved finger. "Here," he said quietly, "under the riverbank. Dad marked it." Ethan nodded once. "We confirm, and we leave." They reached the ridge overlook and killed the engine. Silence rushed in, heavy. Ethan stepped out first. Cold bit through his gloves. He motioned Lucas out, then released Shadow. The dog hit the snow and went to work instantly. Nose down, tail stiff, moving with confidence, like the land was a page he could read. Lucas followed close, breath fogging. Then they smelled it. Chemical, metallic, sour. It didn't belong in clean winter air. Lucas gagged once, hard. "Oh my!" Ethan held up a hand. "Don't breathe deep." They reached the pipes, half buried under ice. Shadow barked once, sharp. Ethan crouched and scraped frost from a valve. Underneath, condensation and warmth. Active. Ethan's face turned colder than the air. He pulled out a camera and started documenting. Valve, serial numbers, the pipe route, the riverbank. Lucas recorded coordinates, hands shaking but doing the job. Nearby, dead fish lay frozen into the ice shelf, dull-eyed. A deer carcass, half buried uphill, stiff and wrong. Lucas's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. His grief had already spent itself on other nights. Ethan finished photographing and looked at Lucas. "Your dad wasn't paranoid." Lucas swallowed. "He was right." Ethan nodded once. "And now you are." They returned to the farmhouse after midnight. The storm had quieted, but the cold sharpened. Inside, Lucas started transferring files to encrypted storage the way Lena instructed in her reply. Short, immediate, precise steps. She had responded faster than Ethan expected. That alone told Ethan she understood urgency. Shadow lay near the window. Then Shadow's head snapped up, ears forward. A growl rolled low from his chest, quiet, controlled, deadly serious. Ethan froze. Not fear, recognition. He moved to the window and peered through a crack in the patchwork cardboard. Headlights, 2 sets, cutting across the snow near the gate. Lucas's face drained of color. "No!" Ethan's voice was a whisper of command. "Lights off, now!" Lucas killed the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. Shadow's growl deepened. Ethan drew his sidearm, not with drama, but with the economy of someone who had done it too many times. He felt his heartbeat settle into a familiar lane. The storm outside swallowed sound, but not all of it. He heard boots, crunching, then a metallic strike. The window exploded. Glass sprayed across the floor like ice shrapnel. Lucas choked back a sound. Shadow surged forward, but Ethan caught his harness and held him, just long enough to time it right. 2 men pushed through the back door, dark parkas, faces half covered. One carried a crowbar. The other had a flashlight taped to a pistol. They weren't here to rob. They were here to retrieve. Shadow launched the moment Ethan released him. The dog hit the first intruder at chest height, knocking him into the wall. Teeth clamped on forearm. A scream ripped loose. The second man swung his weapon toward Shadow. Ethan moved, fast, low, precise. He drove into the man's center line, knocking the gun hand aside. Elbow to ribs, a hard step behind the knee. The attacker folded with a grunt, collapsing onto the floorboards. The fight was violent and short, no wasted motion. Shadow maintained his hold until Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. "Shadow, off!" The dog released instantly and backed, still growling, eyes locked on the man's throat. Lucas was shaking, hands over his mouth, trying not to be loud. Ethan stood over the downed attacker, weapon trained, breathing steady. He looked at the other man clutching his bleeding arm and saw the panic under the mask. Not brave, not committed, just paid. Ethan's eyes were ice. "Who sent you?" The man shook his head frantically. "I don't know." Ethan pressed the muzzle closer. "You know." The man's gaze flicked to the table where the documents sat. "Of course." Ethan's voice dropped. "You came for the box." The man swallowed hard, eyes watering from pain. "We were told just get it back. No questions." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Apex." The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. Lucas's voice broke behind Ethan. "They're going to keep coming." Ethan turned his head slightly. "Then we stop being the hiding place." He looked at Shadow, whose posture was still coiled, ready. Then he looked at Lucas. "We deliver this to Captain Hayes in person," Ethan said, "and we do it before sunrise." Lucas stared at him, terrified and relieved at the same time. Ethan's voice stayed calm, absolute. "Because tonight proved something." He nodded toward the broken window, the blood on the floor, the shattered quiet. "They're not afraid of you." He tapped the box. "They're afraid of this." Ethan didn't waste words. He didn't waste time. He made Lucas sit at the table and keep his hands busy. Zip ties, duct tape, anything that turned shaking into function. He kept the intruders on the floor, bound, gagged with strips torn from their own scarves. Not cruelty, containment. The kind that prevented stupid choices. Shadow stayed between Ethan and the men like a living barrier, shoulders squared, ears forward, eyes unblinking. Lucas kept staring at the attacker's boots, like he couldn't accept that the danger had crossed from rumor into the room. Ethan crouched beside him, voice low enough to be private. "Listen to me." Lucas blinked hard, eyes glassy. "You're not helpless," Ethan said. "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." The last word felt foreign in Ethan's mouth, like a tool he hadn't used in a long time. Ethan checked the truck. Full tank, spare fuel can, tire chains, medkit, blanket. The old habits lined up in his hands like muscle memory. He returned inside and stood over the intruders. "You're alive," he said quietly. "You can keep it that way." One of them moaned through the gag, eyes wide with pain. Ethan pointed his flashlight at the man's face. "Tell me what you were told. Who called you? Where you met? That's all." The man shook his head like a child denying a broken dish, but his eyes flickered toward the back road beyond the property, as if he could see the place he'd come from. Ethan watched the flicker. That was enough. He didn't need a confession. He needed direction. He turned away. Lucas stiffened. "You're just leaving them?" "I'm not executing anyone," Ethan said. Lucas's voice wavered. "They could—" Ethan's stare stopped him cold. "We can't carry prisoners. We can't call local. And we can't stay here." The only thing that matters right now is getting that proof to Captain Hayes through a clean line. Lucas nodded, swallowing hard, accepting the logic even if his body still shook with adrenaline. Ethan opened the back door. The cold slapped the warmth off his skin. Snow drifted in through the broken window. He looked around the farmhouse, the place he'd bought to be a grave for his own life. A quiet ending. Now it had blood on the floor. Now it had a reason. "Move," he said. Shadow went first. Lucas followed, clutching his jacket tight with one hand and the weatherproof pouch strap with the other like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Ethan killed the fire, not because he wanted cold, because he didn't want a beacon. They drove with headlights dimmed, chains clanking, the truck crawling through the valley like a cautious animal. Lucas kept glancing behind them. Ethan kept his eyes forward, not because he didn't care, because fear loved mirrors. They made it to the edge of cellular service just as the eastern sky began to turn the faintest gray. Ethan pulled over beneath a stand of pines and shut off the engine. The silence felt tight-loaded. He took out his phone, one he kept off unless necessary, and powered it on. 1 bar, enough. He dialed a number Lucas recited with shaking precision, like a prayer. It rang once, twice, then a voice, low, controlled, unmistakably in charge. "Hayes?" Lucas swallowed. "Captain, it's Lucas." A pause. Not surprise. Calculation. "Where are you?" Captain Maria Hayes asked. "Not in town," Lucas said. "Not safe. I found the evidence." Ethan leaned in, close enough to be heard. "This is Ethan Cole," he said. "We need a meet. Quiet." Another pause. Ethan could hear her thinking through the line. "How quiet?" Hayes asked. Ethan's gaze swept the snowy tree line. No station, no local units, no calls logged. Hayes didn't hesitate long. "You have visuals?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Docs, maps, photos, coordinates, and 2 men who tried to retrieve it tonight." A sharp inhale. "You're being hunted," Hayes said. Ethan answered simply, "Yes." "Location," Hayes said. Ethan gave it, a mile marker, a turnout, a point of reference that didn't require a street name. Hayes responded immediately, "Stay put. Do not go into town. Do not contact anyone else. I'm bringing 1 person only." "Who?" Ethan asked. "Dr. Lena Moore," Hayes said. Ethan felt a flicker of relief under the ice of his chest. "Good," Ethan said. Then he cut the call. Lucas stared at him, eyes wide. "She believed us." Ethan looked out at the snow-choked valley. "No," he said quietly. "She believed what she already knew was true." Shadow shifted in the back seat, the harness rustling. Ethan reached back and touched the dog's shoulder, steadying himself more than the animal. They waited. Not long. A single set of headlights appeared through the trees, moving slow, cautious, the way only someone careful would drive on ice. Ethan stepped out first, scanning. Hands visible, body angled, control. The car stopped. Engine off. Captain Maria Hayes emerged from the driver's side. She was pragmatic in a way that didn't need armor. Mid-40s, eyes sharp, face tired but not worn down. Her coat was practical, her boots suited for real weather, not photo ops. Dr. Lena Moore stepped out from the passenger side. She moved like someone used to keeping her thoughts organized in chaos. Brilliant, introspective eyes. Dark hair pulled back, gloves already on. She didn't ask, "Is this real?" She asked the only question that mattered. "Where's the evidence?" Ethan nodded toward the truck. Hayes's gaze swept the area once, then settled on Shadow. The dog stood quiet but alert, posture ready. Lena's eyes softened slightly, not sentimental, just recognizing competence when she saw it. Ethan pulled the weatherproof pouch out and set it on the hood of Hayes's car. Lena opened it carefully. Documented. Photographed the documents with her own device while referencing timestamps. She handled the papers like they were fragile, not because they were, but because procedure mattered. She flipped through maps, invoices, photos. Her jaw tightened. "This is enough," she said. Hayes exhaled slowly, controlled, like she'd been holding her breath since Lucas's first word on the phone. Lena looked up at Ethan. "You said you also confirmed active discharge." Ethan handed her the second drive. Photos, GPS coordinates, and video. Lena took it. "Good, that covers chain and corroboration." Lucas stood beside Ethan, trembling less now, eyes locked on Hayes like she was a lifeline. Hayes looked at him, voice firm but not unkind. "Lucas, you did the right thing." Lucas's eyes filled. "They killed my dad." Hayes didn't soften the truth. "I know." Then she turned to Ethan. "And you?" Ethan didn't respond. Hayes studied him like she was reading a file without paper. "You didn't have to get involved." Ethan's voice came out flat. "I know." A beat. Hayes nodded once. "I'm glad you did." Lena closed the pouch. "We take this federal, properly, quietly, but quickly." Hayes's gaze sharpened. "And you two disappear until the handoff is done." Lucas tensed. "Disappear where?" Hayes glanced at Ethan's truck, at the valley behind them. "Anywhere that isn't predictable." Ethan nodded. He already knew. Lena looked at Shadow and then back at Ethan. "The dog stays with you." Ethan's hand rested on the harness. "Always." Hayes started her car. "I'm going to do this clean," she said. "No local sheriff, no mayor, no leaks, but understand something." Ethan looked at her. Hayes's voice went cold. "When this breaks, it will break hard, and the people who paid for silence will panic." Ethan nodded once. He'd seen panic with money behind it. It bled. Hayes looked at Lucas. "You did not imagine this. You are not alone, and we will not bury your father twice." Lucas swallowed and nodded, jaw trembling. Hayes and Lena drove away, their tail lights swallowed by snowfall. Ethan stood in the turnout for a moment after they left, listening to the wind again. It sounded different now, not empty, just waiting. The next 48 hours were a controlled blur. Ethan took Lucas and Shadow back to the farmhouse, only long enough to retrieve necessities. Then they left again. Back roads, unmarked routes, places where the truck's tire tracks could be confused with ranchers and hunters. Ethan didn't tell Lucas everything he was doing. He didn't need to. Lucas watched Ethan the way rookies watched veterans, absorbing method, learning control through proximity. Shadow remained the constant, always alert, always reading the air. At night, they slept in short bursts, truck cab, abandoned sheds, an equipment trailer on land Ethan knew wasn't monitored. Ethan's nightmares came anyway. But now, when he woke with his chest tight and sweat cold on his skin, Shadow's head would lift and press gently against his thigh. Not dramatic, not emotional, just contact. Reality. Lucas noticed once. "He does that for you," Lucas whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't explain what it meant, because explaining would crack something open. On the third day, Hayes called. Her voice was the same, controlled, but there was steel beneath it now. "It's moving," she said. "Federal environmental investigators. 2 agents, quiet entry, no announcement." Ethan's gaze stayed on the horizon. "And the locals?" Hayes exhaled once. "Containment, for now, but they're nervous." Lena's voice came through on speaker beside Hayes's. "They tried to discredit the documents. We countered with your field confirmation. It's airtight." Lucas leaned in, holding his breath. Ethan asked the only question that mattered. "Are we exposed?" Hayes paused. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Hayes continued. "Not officially, but—" Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Hayes's voice sharpened. "We intercepted chatter. Private security contractors. People who don't like federal eyes." Ethan looked at Lucas, then at Shadow. The dog's ears flicked, as if he understood the tone. Hayes's voice sharpened again. "Do not return to that farmhouse until I say it's safe." Ethan's mouth tightened. "Too late. They've already been there. They'll go back." Hayes didn't argue. "Then you stay mobile?" Ethan nodded once. "Understood." That night they heard the engines, not close, not immediate, but distant enough that Ethan's instincts rose. He killed the truck's interior light. He held up a hand to Lucas. Silence. Shadow's growl vibrated low. Headlights flickered through trees far down the road like eyes searching. Ethan watched them pass, slow, methodical. Hunting patterns. Lucas's voice was barely air. "They're looking for us." Ethan's eyes stayed calm. "They won't find us if we don't give them a shape." Shadow's muscles were tight. Ready. Ethan waited until the headlights were gone, then moved, quietly, deliberately, further into the hills. He drove without panic because panic made mistakes. They stayed hidden until dawn. Then Hayes called again. This time there was something new in her voice. Momentum. "It broke," she said. Ethan leaned forward. "How?" "A leak," Hayes said. "Not from us. From them, someone panicked, tried to get ahead of it with a controlled statement." Ethan's mouth tightened. "And it backfired." "Yes," Hayes said. because Lena already had a clean file ready for the feds. The statement contradicted the evidence. Lena's voice came through, crisp. They tried to say it was historic contamination. Your valve photos show active discharge, warm condensation, time-stamped. They can't argue physics. Lucas exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. Hayes continued. Media caught scent, not local. Denver, then national. Ethan stared at the sky, pale and cold. Arrests? Pending, Hayes said, but there's more. Ethan's jaw tightened. Hayes's voice went hard. We reopened your father's case, Lucas. The accident report had inconsistencies, missing photographs. A tow record that doesn't match time logs. Lucas's throat worked. So, they lied. Hayes's tone softened slightly. Yes, and now they're cornered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Cornered animals bit. Hayes's voice sharpened again. Ethan, I need you to bring Lucas in. We need a recorded statement in federal custody. It's safer, and it locks this down. Ethan hesitated only long enough to map it. Where? Hayes gave the location, a federal building 2 counties over, a route that avoided compromised roads, and a time window that minimized exposure. Ethan nodded. We'll be there. He ended the call and looked at Lucas. You're going to have to talk, Ethan said. Lucas's face tightened. I can. Ethan studied him. You don't have to be fearless, you just have to be honest. Lucas nodded slowly. I can do, honest. Shadow shifted and pressed closer to Lucas's leg, a quiet, grounding presence. They drove toward the meet. The federal building wasn't dramatic. No flashing lights, no cheering, just concrete, security cameras, and a sense of order. Hayes met them at a side entrance. Lena was there too, holding a sealed folder. She looked at Lucas. We're going to do this clean. You'll tell the sequence, the threats, the evidence, the break-in, everything. Lucas nodded, hands clenched. Ethan stayed just behind him, a silent wait. The agents took Lucas inside. Shadow was not allowed past a certain line. Ethan didn't like that. But Lena stepped close. I'll stay with you, she said quietly. Ethan glanced at her. You don't need to. Lena's eyes held his. Yes, I do, because you're part of chain 2. They waited. Hours passed. Finally, Lucas emerged, face pale but steadier, like speaking had drained poison out. Hayes placed a hand briefly on Lucas's shoulder. You did well. Lucas's eyes were wet. Did it matter? Hayes nodded. Yes. Then she turned to Ethan. Now, Hayes said, we do what they didn't expect. Ethan's gaze sharpened. Which is? Hayes's mouth tightened. We make it public. Ethan stared at her. Public draws fire. Yes, Hayes said, but it also draws witnesses, allies. It forces clean eyes on dirty hands. Ethan looked at Lena. Lena nodded once. It's already moving. You can't put it back. 2 days later, the headlines hit. Not because of a miracle. Because truth, once documented properly, was hard to smother. A corporate development project under investigation for illegal dumping. Local officials suspected of bribery and obstruction. A whistleblower death reopened. The corporation's leadership released statements, then retracted them, then blamed contractors, then blamed miscommunication. None of it stuck. Federal investigators were already in the valley. Ethan didn't watch the news at first. He kept moving. He kept Lucas safe. But Lucas found a motel television one night and turned it on. A reporter stood in front of the Montana River. The background was blurred, but Ethan could recognize the valley lines. Then a photo appeared on screen. Not Ethan, not Lucas, Shadow. The dog's face in sharp focus, amber eyes steady, harness visible. Caption, K9 assists in uncovering evidence tied to environmental crime. Lucas's breath caught. Ethan's chest tightened. Not pride, something heavier, recognition. The reporter talked about bravery and loyalty and justice, but Ethan only heard one thing beneath it all. Noise. A lot of noise. And noise meant unpredictable pressure. But it also meant the people who had been hiding in the quiet were being dragged into the light. Hayes called that night. Arrests are happening, she said. Ethan didn't ask who first. He knew it would be the ones with the weakest stomachs. Hayes continued. Sheriff, mayor, 2 county clerks, they thought they were untouchable. Lucas made a sound like he might cry. Hayes's voice softened. And Lucas, your father is being formally recognized as a whistleblower. The case is being reclassified. Lucas closed his eyes. Ethan watched him and felt something shift. Not healing, but the first step toward it. Hayes's voice turned firm again. "You two can come home, not tonight, but soon. Federal presence will be heavy for a while." Ethan's gaze drifted toward Shadow. Home. The word felt unfamiliar. He had bought a farmhouse to disappear. He hadn't expected it to become a place worth returning to. Spring came late. It always did in those hills. The snow didn't melt politely. It retreated in dirty patches, revealing dark earth underneath like bruises fading slow. When Ethan finally drove back up the ridge to the farmhouse, he almost didn't recognize it. Not because the house had changed, though it had. The broken window was repaired. Fresh boards patched the back door. The porch had new supports. But because Ethan had changed. He stepped out of the truck and stood still. The wind carried a different scent now, not just pine and cold, but thaw, life. Lucas got out beside him, eyes scanning the property like he expected men to step out from behind trees. Shadow jumped down and trotted the perimeter, nose working, posture confident. No growling, no alarm, just assessment. Ethan watched Shadow and felt his shoulders drop slightly. The dog wasn't afraid. That mattered more than anything. Captain Hayes arrived later with Lena. Hayes walked the property with Ethan, checking corners like an officer who didn't trust peace until it proved itself. Lena stepped inside and looked around, eyes taking in the space. "This place is different," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "It's less dead." Lucas stood near the fireplace, staring at the spot where the intruders had broken in, where blood had stained the boards. He looked at Ethan. "What now?" Ethan didn't answer right away, because now was the hardest part. In war, you knew what you were supposed to do. You moved, you survived, you kept going. In peace, you had to choose. Hayes folded her arms. "Now we decide what this place becomes." Lucas blinked. "What do you mean?" Hayes looked at Ethan. "You bought this land to vanish." Ethan didn't deny it. Hayes continued, "But it pulled you into something bigger. You have skills, you have stability, and you have a K-9 who, whether you like it or not, has become a symbol." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Hayes said, "but it's here, so what do you do with it?" Silence stretched. Then Lucas said quietly, "My dad used to say a house isn't where you live, it's where people can come when the world is too hard." Ethan looked at him. Lucas's eyes were wet, but steady now. He wanted the truth to matter, not just to punish bad people, but to protect good ones. Lena nodded slowly. "Trauma doesn't heal in isolation forever," she said. "Not if you want to stay alive." Ethan stared at the floorboards. He remembered nights when silence had felt like safety, but he also remembered how silence had almost killed him. He looked at Shadow, who lay near the door now, head on paws, watching all of them. Not guarding against them, guarding with them. Ethan's voice came out low. "We turn it into a place that can hold people." Hayes's eyes narrowed slightly. "A center?" Ethan nodded once. "Small, controlled, not a publicity circus." Lucas exhaled like something loosened in his chest. "A place for vets. For people who don't have somewhere to go when it gets loud." Lena's gaze softened. "A structured program, work, routine, therapy space, the kind that treats dignity like a requirement." Hayes nodded. "And I can keep it protected." Ethan looked at her. "Why would you?" Hayes's eyes stayed steady. "Because I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by systems that pretend to be clean." Ethan didn't argue. They worked, not in a montage with music, in real hours, wood, nails, concrete, paperwork. Permits Hayes pushed through with stubborn precision. Lena designed a program that didn't treat veterans like broken machines. She treated them like people who had been trained to survive threats and now needed a new map for living. Lucas handled outreach, speaking to people he never would have believed would listen to him before. Other deputies, other vets, survivors, people who lived with storms inside them. Shadow became the bridge. At first, people watched him from the doorway, unsure. Then Shadow would approach, not fast, not demanding, and sit within reach like he was offering the simplest deal in the world. "You don't have to talk. Just breathe. I'll stay." Men who hadn't unclenched their hands in years would slowly, eventually reach out. Shadow would lean in, and something in the room would loosen. Not miracles, not God's thunder, just nervous systems learning safety again. One afternoon, a man in his 40s stood at the entrance, face hard with old grief. He didn't step inside, he just stared. Lucas was about to speak, but Ethan held up a hand. Let Shadow do it. Shadow trotted forward, calm, tail low but relaxed, ears alert. He approached the man and stopped just far enough to be respectful. The man swallowed hard, then crouched. Shadow sniffed his hand gently and licked his fingers once. The man's shoulders dropped like a weight had been unhooked. He didn't cry. He just breathed. Lena watched from the hallway, eyes thoughtful. "That's the moment," she whispered to Ethan. Ethan didn't respond, because he felt it too, the moment where service stopped being a job and became a purpose. Weeks later, a small news crew came to do a piece on the Valley's Recovery Center. Hayes controlled access, no sensational footage, no pity narrative, just truth. The reporter asked Ethan questions. Ethan answered in short sentences. The reporter asked Lucas about his father. Lucas answered with steady grief and clear facts. Then the reporter pointed at Shadow. "What made the K-9 search the barn?" she asked. Ethan looked at Shadow and then back at the camera. "He smelled what was wrong," Ethan said simply, "and he didn't let it stay buried." That line became the one people repeated, because it was simple, because it was true, and because sometimes America loved a story where a dog did what humans were too compromised to do. The day the sign went up, it was Lucas who painted the letters. The Hayes Center. Lena raised an eyebrow. "You chose the name." Lucas nodded. "It's my dad's name, and it's Captain Hayes' name." Hayes stared at it for a long moment, then looked away. "I didn't do it for the plaque." Lucas's voice was gentle. "I know. That's why it matters." Ethan stood on the porch that evening, watching the sun sink behind the hills, turning the melting snow into something gold. Shadow lay near his boots. Inside, voices drifted through the open window. Low laughter, quiet conversation, the sound of people trying again. Ethan's chest tightened, not with panic but with something unfamiliar, a kind of peace that didn't come from silence. It came from belonging. Ethan's voice came out low, almost lost in the wind. "Sometimes," he said, "the lost ones don't find home by looking for it." Lucas glanced at him. Ethan continued, eyes fixed on the hills. "Sometimes they find it by standing between danger and someone else." Lucas swallowed. "Yeah." Shadow exhaled, slow, steady. The wind moved through the pine line like a sigh, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was listening for the next explosion. He was listening for people living. Shadow lifted his head and looked at Ethan, then at Lucas, then back at the valley. Still working, still guarding. But now guarding something that wasn't hidden, something that was alive.